This is Gareth Southgate, and this is the Three Lions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne and this is an independent England football supporters podcast. How are you? Hope you're keeping well. There was a lot of love for the recent episode, the one where I spoke with Lisa about her adopted Macedonian street dog Lexo. We're really soft when it comes to animals, aren't we? Love it. If you've not heard it yet, just head to your podcast provider of choice and tune in there. Whilst you're there, don't be shy to leave a review. They're always appreciated. As are the contributions to the Ko-Fi account, ko-fi.com/Three Lions podcast. January's hosting was funded by some of you guys. Thank you. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Now, coming up on this episode, I am going to be chatting with another author who has written an England-related book, but with a twist. Stay tuned. Also, I just want to throw forward to the Nations League draw. That's coming up on the 8th of February. I'll just refresh your memory on that. So that's still to come. But first, January can be a tight old month for many of us, can't it? Christmas still on the credit card. Doesn't seem to apply for football clubs though, does it? On the 1st of February, the transfer window that opened on the 1st of January closed. Now, it wasn't the biggest of windows, far from it. Only £100 million being spent by English Premier League clubs. Hard push to buy a single player for that these days, aren't there? But only 30 players made a move, either permanent or loan. I think it's a sign of the times now, isn't it? What with FFP in place and clubs deciding that January perhaps isn't the best of times to make a change, weighing up should they add a player to an already successful team, or whether they want to take the gamble on bringing in someone to a struggling side and then it doesn't go to plan. And as well, I read another option about this. I think there's only been a couple of managerial changes. So perhaps managers are happy with the players they've got. Who knows? But as I like to do at this time of year, let's just run down those players that have made a January move, those with an England connection. Now first, on the 11th of January, Eric Dyer has made a loan switch from Tottenham to Bayern Munich. 49 caps for Eric Dyer, 3 goals. His debut was against Spain in Alicante 2015. You may remember we lost that one 2-0. That was a good trip, that one. He did score the winner against Germany in the 2016 friendly that ended 3-2 in Berlin. And he last played for England in the 3-0 victory against Senegal in the Qatar World Cup. Now, he got on the pitch as a substitute for Bayern recently in their 1-0 victory over Union Berlin. But he got a bit of stick for his accent in the same way that you may remember Steve McLaren and Joey Barton did in the past. It's a bit harsh, I thought, I have to be honest, considering he has got I think he was brought up in Portugal from a fairly early age before he moved to Spurs. But Eric Dyer was the first one to make a move. And I think there's still a chance that he could make an England squad in the future. He could be part of the team that goes to Germany in the summer. Now, same day, 11th of January, Jadon Sancho made a move from Manchester United to Borussia Dortmund on loan. He went back to Borussia Dortmund, hasn't he? As that was where Manchester United originally signed him from. 23 caps to Jadon Sancho's name. He's got 3 goals, and his debut was in the 0-0 draw away to Croatia in 2018. That was the game that was played in Rijeka that was behind closed doors. He scored twice in the 5-3 win against Kosovo down at Southampton a few years back. Interestingly, 22 of those 23 caps he has actually came whilst he was at Dortmund. And he won't need reminding, and neither do we, but he had his penalty saved in the Euro final against Italy, didn't he? His next and last cap came as a Manchester United player in October 2021, a 5-0 away victory against Andorra, where he was booked and subbed off in the 72nd minute. But he was straight into the Dortmund team that beat Darmstadt a while back and provided an assist for their second goal. If he manages to get his head right in the right place, like Eric Dyer, I can see no reason why Jadon Sancho couldn't find himself back in an England team at some point. Whether it'll be for the Euros, not sure. Then we went a week with no movement, but the 18th of January, Jordan Henderson made the move from Al Ettifaq to Ajax in the Netherlands. Now, where do we go with this one? So, back in July, Henderson left Liverpool for 12 million and headed to the Saudi Pro League and Al Ettifaq, a team managed by Steven Gerrard. Henderson was one of many who headed for the bright lights and big money of Saudi Arabia. The move caused a lot of controversy at the time for a number of reasons. Was the Saudi Pro League going to be good enough for Henderson to retain his England place? Was he just going for the money? And then there was his previous words of support for the LGBTQ plus community, which by going to Saudi, he seemed to have stepped back on his word. My only words on the Saudi Pro League are, remember the Chinese Super League and the money that was thrown at that. But now I don't know the full ins and outs of the move, but clearly it hasn't worked out for him. So he's jumped at the chance of joining Ajax, a massive club who are, to be fair, having a bit of a mare at the moment. But I think I actually saw that following his arrival, his number 6 shirt has become the most popular shirt Ajax have ever sold. Although I think I did also see that they were only €40. €40 for a shirt. Those were the days. Henderson has 81 caps to his name. He made his debut back in 2010 in a 2-1 home defeat to France at Wembley under Fabio Capello. Now, it took him a little while to become a regular, but he was part of tournament squads that went to Ukraine, Brazil, France, Russia and Qatar. And he was vice-captain of the Euro 2020 squad. And it was there that he scored his first England goal, a header against Ukraine. And you may remember the whole Saudi affair did affect some England crowds and the reaction to Henderson. Some boos were heard on the announcement of his name in the lineups or when he was substituted on or off. But he's always been one of Gareth's go-to players. And it'll be interesting to see what sort of effect he has at Ajax. And going forward to the Euros later this year, I would say Henderson will be part of the squad. And then the 26th of January, Calvin Phillips. Some would say he came to his senses, made a loan move from Manchester City to West Ham United. Back in July 2022, he initially moved from Leeds United to Manchester City for 45 million on a 6-year contract. I mean, at the time, could you blame him? Chance to play for a title-winning team, play in the Champions League. I'd imagine a slight salary increase too. But it did become quite apparent very quickly that he wasn't going to slot straight in, to the point that he only started twice for City under Guardiola. But fortunately for him, in that time, Gareth Southgate remained loyal to him. He won 8 caps in that time. In total, he actually has 31 to his name. Just the one goal which was scored in that 7-0 thrashing of North Macedonia at Old Trafford in June of last year. I'm sure everyone is hopeful he can get back to regular game time now for West Ham, and maybe with a view to a permanent move. And that was pretty much it. There was talk of Chelsea's Conor Gallagher interest in Tottenham, but that didn't materialise in the end, all a bit of paper talk or internet talk. Maybe that'll happen at a later date. Who knows? But there was also a surprising piece of news that wasn't confirmed at the time of recording, but Jesse Lingard, formerly of Nottingham Forest, was set for a move to Korea, of all places, to FC Seoul. And he's 31 now. I think it's safe to say his England days are over. And no matter how much he sets that league alight, if that move goes through, I kind of think he's just a player that maybe just didn't really meet his potential. Shame, really.
Solum audax, solum fortis, solum magnus, the Nations League.
Now I mentioned the Nations League. The draw for that is being made on the 8th of February in Paris at the yearly UEFA Congress. Originally, it was supposed to be held in Madrid, but with the whole Rubiales shambles scandal, they moved it. Now, with Paris just being over the road for us, or for me, it did cross my mind to pop over there and see what the atmosphere is like for a UEFA Congress and what it's like surrounding a draw. But firstly, though, for the life of me, I can't find out where this Congress is taking place. Whether it's at the top of the Arc de Triomphe, at the bottom of the Eiffel Tower, in the Pompidou Centre. I don't know. I can't find out where it is. And then I thought, what with the last draw, the one for the Euros where some clown hid a mobile phone in the auditorium, the place, wherever it'll be on a lockdown anyway. So I thought against it. I'll wait until the next one comes to England. Which incidentally, we've not hosted a UEFA Congress since 1996. It's been hosted in Vienna 5 times since it began in 1955. I don't know what they chat about there, really, other than doing a draw every few years. But it's something I shouldn't get hung up on, really, is it? But the long and short of it is I decided not to go. But the draw will be made, and I'll do a review podcast on who we've been drawn against very soon. But I thought, let's just quickly cover our potential opponents. And just to add, we're in League B. I'm sure you don't need me to elaborate on why. Let's just say a couple of years ago, we made a right mess of things against Italy, Germany and Hungary. And now we're paying the price. Although from a purely selfish fan's perspective, some of these potential away trips look quite interesting. None of the oppositions though, should be taken lightly either. Now we've been drawn in pot 1 alongside Austria, the Czech Republic and Wales. The Czech Republic, I think they called Czech Republic Czechia now. I don't know what the official term is. You know what I mean. So first and foremost, we can't be drawn with any of those. So let's move on to pot 2. Finland, Ukraine, Iceland and Norway. Now a couple of things immediately spring out to me. First of all, Ukraine. Again, nothing against Ukraine. Far from it. But having played them in the most recent European qualifying and also the Euros in Rome a few years ago, I'd prefer it if we were kept apart. Because also, you may remember the away fixture against them last year. Whilst Wrocław in Poland was lovely, it was announced quite late in the day, leaving fans very lastminute.com. And the other thing is, that's very Scandinavian heavy. Could be very expensive. Finland. The last time we played them was in 2001 as part of the 2002 World Cup qualifying. That could be interesting. Iceland. Now, we'll put an asterisk next to Iceland because I'll need to come back to them in a moment. But we last played them in 2020 as part of that Nations League campaign. It was behind closed doors, so you may have to rattle the old grey matter to remember that one. But as I said, we'll come back to Iceland in a moment. Then Norway, last played them in 2014 in a friendly at Wembley, winning by 1-0 thanks to a Wayne Rooney penalty. And the last time away was in 2012. It was a game I didn't go to, but I remember where I was. I watched it in a club just off of Leicester Square in London. I was on a stag do. So yeah, that'd be an interesting one. Go to Oslo. So that's pot 2. Pot 3, one of Slovenia, Republic of Ireland, Albania or Montenegro. 3 of those I've previously done away with England before. Slovenia, of course, we've been drawn against in the Euros this summer, but we last played them in 2017, winning 1-0 at Wembley. The Republic of Ireland, some would welcome a quick hop across the Irish Sea to Dublin. Many that went last time in 2015 will think, no, not again, especially on the football front. And the idea of standing on one of the most shallow of stands, grandstands at the Aviva, no, it doesn't hold much appeal to me. And like Scandinavia, Dublin, it's not cheap, is it? Albania. I'd like this one to fall our way. I went to Kosovo via Albania in 2019, and I liked what I saw. I'd like to check it out a little bit more. And we played Albania in 2021, but like Iceland, that was behind closed doors. The stadium in Tirana, that looks good. Then Montenegro, I went in 2013. We also played them in 2019. Both times there was a small allocation of away tickets, and my abiding memory of the place was that Podgorica wasn't the biggest of capital cities. There was lots of Robocop-like police everywhere, and there was a very vocal problem with racism from the stands. You may remember Raheem Sterling cupping his ears. He could hear it. We could hear it. And then we move on to pot 4, Georgia, Greece, Turkey and Kazakhstan. All very interesting. Georgia, last played them in 1997. I quite fancy a trip to Tbilisi. That looks interesting. Greece, another who we've not faced in a while, 2001 in fact. Yes, you know the one. Beckham and his free kick. Turkey, this could be interesting given the history. Last played in a friendly in 2016 up at Manchester City before the Euros. But we've not been away to Turkey since 2003. Then there's Kazakhstan. Yep. 3,500 miles away, bordering China. Still, they are part of UEFA. Not the easiest of places to get to. One I'd love to go to. I'm not sure financially if I'll be able to do it, though. We'll have to wait and see. But we've played them before, part of the 2010 World Cup qualifying. 5-1 at home, 4-0 away. Now, I mentioned Iceland, and as I've just mentioned Kazakhstan too, I'll explain. The Nations League has various criteria. One of them is excessive distance. So between us and also Iceland, we can't be drawn with Kazakhstan and Iceland. So if we draw Iceland early on in the proceedings, you can immediately discount Kazakhstan from your thoughts and plans. Obviously, if Iceland are drawn elsewhere, then a trip to Astana is still on the cards. And I'll have to do my very best to find an English-speaking Kazakh who knows his football onions. But I've got a feeling that Kazakhstan, well, they can't be drawn against Wales in Pot A or the Republic of Ireland as well. So it does get a little bit complicated. Now, alongside the excessive travel rule, there is the winter venue restriction. And whilst according to UEFA's rules, and I quote, League B, no winter venue restrictions applies. The 4 winter venues allocated to League B, Finland, Iceland, Ukraine and Norway, all belong in Pot 2. They can therefore not be drawn in the same group. What I would say is that whoever we draw from Pot 2, I'd imagine they'll try and arrange away from the November match days. So if we were to draw Iceland, I would think we would play Iceland at home, Norway or Finland as well, in November. With regards to those match days, I'll go over them in the next episode when I cover who we've been drawn against. Some people write off the Nations League saying they're not competitive games. I'll have to disagree, personally. I enjoy it. This is the 4th edition of the competition, and although we're not at the top table, those that are, it serves as a way towards the 2026 World Cup. It's not a competition to be taken lightly. And one day, I'd love to see us lifting that trophy. Wouldn't you? Now, it's my pleasure to welcome John McGee to the Three Lions podcast, author of the book Pride of the Three Lions, the untold story of the men and women who made the heroes of 1966. John, hello there.
Hi there, Russell. How are you doing?
I'm very well.
Good to speak to you tonight.
Yeah, no, I'm very well, and likewise, good to speak to you. Welcome on board to the Three Lions podcast. Now, you've written a few books prior to this one. One's about Aberdeen, Celtic, Hearts, Rangers, and the Scottish national team. So one would think, okay, there's your angle, football, north of the border. Why now England?
Well, the book series actually came about because I was a Celtic supporter. And I had memories of Celtic winning the European Cup in 1967. But I'm also a professional genealogist, and my speciality is actually in Scottish genealogy.
Okay.
So I knew that Celtic being all Scotsmen, it was going to be a fairly easy process for me as a Scottish genealogist to do a kind of who do you think you are type book on the Lisbon Lions.
I understand.
So that's where I came up with the idea.
So was that the first book about Celtic?
That was Pride of the Lions was the first book. In 2017 it came out. And then I followed that up with the 16 greatest Scottish managers. But I mean, that includes people like Busby, Shankly, Souness, Dalglish, like people that spent their lives in English football. So it did cover a wide gamut of footballing knowledge down in England as well.
Of course, yes. Do you know, I'm now beginning to understand the genealogy side of things, combining it with football and your team.
Yes. Well, what I had always wanted to do was, I was a Celtic fan, but I also became a Manchester United fan. I can hear some of your listeners are going to be booing, but since 1968, I followed Manchester United because they won the European Cup the following year.
They did,
and I always wanted to do the book on the Red Devils, but I didn't have enough expertise in doing English genealogy. But I then hooked up with a colleague of mine who lives in Yorkshire, and he's an English genealogist, and he was able to give me a start, particularly because he'd actually done some work for Gordon Banks
Okay.
And he gave me some help on the Gordon Banks chapter. So that was chapter 1. Pretty well done using some of the information that he gave me. And I took it on from there. I then started to find that some of the English genealogy wasn't as difficult as I had first foreseen. And I was able to then produce the Pride of the Three Lions.
Now, this might be a silly question. What's the difference between Scottish genealogy and English genealogy?
Well, the main difference is that in Edinburgh, you can go to Edinburgh and they have a Scotland's People Centre there.
Right.
And you can basically buy a seat for a day and you can look at as many births, marriages, deaths, census records, all that sort of thing in the one day, in the one place.
I see.
Whereas the English records, the actual births, marriages, deaths, etc., they're not readily online. What you have is the registers of births, marriages, and deaths. And if you actually want the actual birth record, you've got to apply to the General Register Office in London, and you pay like £15 each time for one document. So it makes it much more difficult. But once you get a start and say you get back into the era where, let's say from 1921 going backwards, when you've got all the census records, you can then go to sites like, say, Ancestry, and another one called Family Search, where you get access to the census records. And one of the ones that was most important for the Pride of the Three Lions was the 1939 War Register. That was very good because when you find them on the War Register, that actually gives the ancestors they had the dates of birth on there.
Right.
So that gave you a big clue, as to when they were born, etc.
I mean, some would say that those sort of records are readily available on the likes of Wikipedia or something when the players were born.
Oh yeah, when the players were born. But remember, what I'm doing is I'm then doing their parents, and then their grandparents,
Gotcha.
and then their great-grandparents.
Right,
Now,
yes.
Obviously, you don't get that off of Wikipedia. Wikipedia is good for giving me a start and say the date of birth of the actual player. And I do put a small biography of the player's career, at the start of the chapter. But most of it's concerned with who were the men and women that actually produced these heroes in '66.
Gotcha. So when did you begin the research for the book, and how long did it take?
Now, I published Pride of the Three Lions in July last year, so I would have started it towards the autumn of, so that would be 2022. Now, obviously, I'm not on it continuously,
No,
but it usually takes me, say, about 6 to 8 months to put a book like that together.
wow, that gives an insight into how long it would take.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, there's quite a lot of research and double checking and all that sort of thing. Make sure you've got your references and facts correct. And sometimes you're trying to get in touch with players. I mean, I haven't been in touch with any of the English players, but I have been in touch with some of the Scottish players.
Yeah.
When I did Pride of the Bears, which is the Rangers team that won the 1972 European Cup Winners' Cup, I got to meet a few of the players there, which was quite good. And some of them were actually quite interested in knowing what their family history was.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, now it's such an accessible thing to do now, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
find out where you came from, where you
Yeah.
derived from.
And what I try to do, Russell, is not so much just a standard, say, family history. Here was the parents, here was the grandparents, here was the great grandparents. Using as much information as I can find about them, I talk about their like their social history, their involvement in world wars, within like their involvement in the Depression, or through the Industrial Revolution or the Agrarian Revolution. I try to bring all that into it. Things like the Irish potato famine. Why did Irish people come to the UK in the mid 19th century? Obviously, it was because of the potato famine. And the player that I've got in mind there in the book is actually Nobby Stiles.
Okay.
Nobby Stiles was the only Catholic player who played for the team in 1966, and all his ancestors came from Ireland.
Right. Ah,
And
two and two together.
They came through, originally the Stiles came through Liverpool, and then they eventually moved to Collyhurst in Manchester. And I don't know if you know this, but the Stiles family for a few generations were actually undertakers in Collyhurst.
I didn't know that. Ah.
Yeah, I think the firm still goes on, but it's been taken on, say, by a son-in-law, and he's renamed it as something else. But it was originally the Stiles funeral services that was in Collyhurst.
Wow. I mean, you must have made so many little discoveries like that whilst writing and researching.
Yeah.
One question I would sort of pick up, and I understand it now, but like, who were the women?
Yes,
who
that's obviously the mothers and the grandmothers and the great grandmothers.
Yes, of course.
I mean, that's what I'm trying to convey in the book, is that without these women, you would never have had the men that ran onto the park in Wembley in 1966.
Of course, that famous day. Go on, then. I don't want to give too many scenarios away from the book, because obviously you want people to go and seek it out for themselves. But come on, give us another one, another discovery that you found whilst writing and researching it.
Well, one of the other discoveries I found were at least two of the players lost their grandfathers in the First World War.
Right.
So
I guess that's understandable.
Yeah. Well, that was Bobby Moore.
Right.
And his grandfather was Robert Moore. I think he was with a Norfolk regiment. And Martin Peters, his grandfather was called Stanford Peters. Now, I think you might know that Martin Peters was Martin Stanford Peters.
Oh, I didn't. No. Okay.
Yeah. So he was named after his grandfather.
Right.
His grandfather he actually worked for the Inland Water Transport Board,
right.
Which was basically working the Thames, the Thames waterways.
Yes. But
during the First World War, he would have been ferrying the troops across the Channel
right.
from Dover over to Calais.
Adaptable skills.
Yeah, and he was wounded in France, and they brought him back. Now, I think, is it Brookwood Cemetery?
Right.
It's in Dover anyway.
Okay.
It's a big military cemetery for the sort of naval and seamen in Dover.
Right.
And Stanford Peters was buried there. And I kind of made the point that this might have given an added incentive for England to go out and beat Germany
right.
in 1966, because they had a few scores to settle.
Yeah, I see what you mean there. Okay. People who...
I'll put another discovery in your path, is that when I did it, I was surprised to find, and generally more, like I would say 90% of it is English ancestry, but there is Scottish, Welsh, and Irish ancestry. So you needed some Scots, some Welshmen, and some Irishmen to produce these players. As I said, Styles was Irish. Surprisingly, I found Martin Peters had some Scottish ancestry.
Did he?
He did, yeah. And the two Charlton brothers, their grandmother was Scottish.
Well, they were obviously
She
born
was
both
from Edinburgh.
Oh, right. I mean, they were sort of relatively close to the border, being up in Northumberland
Yeah,
way,
that's
weren't
right.
they?
Well, she came down from Edinburgh to Hexham and married. I think it was Robert Charlton. I think it was Robert Charlton she married,
Right.
and then she ended up in Newcastle.
Yeah.
She ended up in Newcastle, and the family then moved to Ashington in Northumberland.
Yeah. Well, maybe when Scotland win a trophy, there might be an English influence in some of it.
Absolutely.
just even up the score there.
Yeah.
I mean, the question that some people might have if they've seen your book or online or on social media, they'll go, hang on a minute, I'm confused here. The Pride of the Three Lions is written by a Derek Niven, not a John McGee. What's the situation there?
Yeah, well, obviously, when I started out, I'll go back a year before I produced the Pride of the Lions, which was the Celtic book, and I'd actually, when I retired in 2007 from the railway, I came up with the idea that I wanted to write a book. And again, it was going to be kind of genealogy based, but it was based on like my own genealogy and my wife's genealogy.
Okay.
And then I found that this book was going to be too close to the bone, so to speak. So what I ended up doing was I wrote it as a sci-fi book,
right.
And I set it in the future. And it was called 2084, The End of Days.
Right.
Now, I went to a school in Glasgow, and there was a person called Derek Niven van den Bogard went to that same school.
Right.
So I took the pseudonym Derek Bogard for the sci-fi book. Now, Derek Niven van den Bogard actually became Sir Dirk Bogarde. Do you know Sir Dirk Bogarde?
No, I don't. Go on.
You don't?
No, I feel quite uneducated here.
He's a famous actor,
right?
And he was also a famous author as well. So because he went to the same school as me, I took Derek Bogarde for the sci-fi books, and then I come up with the idea of the football books, and I knew had it in mind to do like a Celtic book and a Rangers book, and I felt I didn't want abuse on social media, so I thought if I come up with a pseudonym for it, then they can give Derek Niven as much abuse as they like, but it's not me that's taking the abuse. So that's why. So Derek Niven, Niven was actually Dirk Bogarde's mother's maiden name, and she actually was Scottish herself. So that's where the Derek Niven came from.
I see. It's nothing to do with the Derek Niven who played for Stenhousemuir and Wraith Rovers, then.
It isn't actually. I found that out later that there was actually a player called Derek Niven. You know, I didn't know. I had no idea. And then I did find out latterly that there was a player. So that is a complete coincidence.
That's fair. Has he contacted you?
Not as far as I know.
Maybe he'll want his genealogy looked into.
Yeah. I've had one or two players like Lou Macari, and
right.
I've had one or two players down in England that have contacted me on social media.
Well, speaking social media, if people want to get in touch with you, is that the best way to do it?
Yes. For the Pride of the Three Lions, it's at Derek Niven 1966.
Lovely. I will link to that. And where can the main thing is where can the book be bought?
I've been lucky enough to get the books into Waterson's, and they are distributing it down to some of the English stores. So if you check online, you'll see which stores and what that Waterson's are currently stocking it in. But if you went into your local Waterson's, I'm sure they would be able to get it within 2 to 3 days, because I know there is a stock of them in the Waterson's central store. The other place you can get it, obviously, is on Amazon. And on Amazon, you can either get it in paperback or, if you like, to download it onto an e-reader, you can get the Kindle version as well.
Oh, of course. Well, I'd say that's quite an achievement to get it into a physical bookshop such as Waterstone. So, yeah,
yes,
congratulations.
I was very lucky there, because I know that it is quite difficult to get a book in. I mean, the likes of the sci-fi book, that they weren't interested because there's so much competition. But when they looked at the football books, they said, "Oh no, they'll sell." So they were happy to take them.
Oh, good stuff. I can't imagine what that's like, going into a bookshop and picking your own book off the shelf. I bet that's quite a thrill.
Well, I mean, what I do is I tend to go in and ask them, do they want them signed? They'll put signed by the author.
Of course.
I mean, I took a trip down to Manchester, just to sign the books down there. I would go anywhere, to sign the books if Waterson's gave me the call.
Oh, good stuff. Well, I wish you all the very best with it. Have you got any other books on the horizon?
Well, I'm currently working on one called Pride of the Red Devils. As I say, I'm a big fan of Manchester United. Big fan of Matt Busby. He's actually he's in the 16 Scottish Manager books, which is called Pride of the Jocks. And his story is, it's actually remarkable, because when Busby was a boy, his father and 4 uncles all went to serve in the First World War, and not one of them come back.
Yeah, right.
And by the end of the First World War, Busby and his maternal grandfather were the only 2 males left in the family.
Oh, really? Wow.
They were, yes. And his mother remarried, and she was going to emigrate to America, and Busby, I think, had the ticket and decided that last minute he didn't want to go to America. And instead, he went down to Liverpool and played for Liverpool, and then ended up at Manchester United, and the rest is history.
How history could have changed had he have taken that ticket.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the kind of little things I like to bring out in the book. Obviously, you had the Munich air disaster as well.
Yes.
He survived that. Had he not survived that, had Charlton hadn't survived it, Bill Fowkes, if he hadn't survived it, then who knows whether Manchester United would have won in 1968. I mean, Busby had to rebuild that team from scratch, basically.
Yeah. Well,
so that's the little nuances that I like to bring out in the books. The Hearts book that I wrote, The Pride of the Hearts, was about the 16 Hearts players who signed up for the First World War. And again, 6 of them didn't come back. And I was actually, when I was writing that book, I was actually in tears. I mean, it was so emotional writing that book.
Yeah.
And there's a memorial over in Contalmaison in France, just to the Hearts players. who lost their lives at that place in Contalmaison.
Really? Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. The funny thing was, in 2016, I was doing a tour of the battlefields, and my brother-in-law and I had cycled up to Contalmaison on the 2nd of July, which was the second day of the 100th anniversary of the Battle of the Somme. And the Hearts bus had actually just pulled up outside the church there.
Oh, coincidence.
And they were all in their suits and ties, and we were going to go into the church, but we were in our lycra gear, so we felt it was a bit presumptuous going into a church and cycling lycra.
Yeah. It just goes to show that football clubs and players still are aware of the past, and if there was no past, there'd be no present.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you go to Tynecastle, they've got a whole section devoted to the First World War in their museum.
Right.
I mean, that's their motto. Blood never shows on a maroon jersey, because they wear maroon.
Yes. Yeah, they do.
But because they lost so many men, and it wasn't just the players, but because so many players signed up, there was something like 500 Hearts fans signed up and about 250 Hibs fans signed up just to be in that battalion alongside their heroes.
Wow.
And so many of them lost their lives.
Yeah.
It was such a tragedy.
Yeah. Well, I feel I've learned quite a lot there, not just about England, but about Scottish teams as well. Every day is a school day, as they say.
Absolutely. It's fascinating what you find out when you start to look at a player. Absolutely.
When you start to dig. Fascinating. Really enjoyed that. John, thank you very much for your time. As I say, the book is available at Waterstones online. Pride of the Three Lions, the untold story of the men and women who made the heroes of 1966. I wish you all the very best with it.
Okay, Russell. Thanks very much.
My many thanks to John there. Or Derek. Enjoyable chat, informative and interesting. Who knew all these things? You can find out more on his social media feed on Twitter at Derek Niven 1966. Now, he's kindly offered up 2 copies of his book, both signed. If you'd like the opportunity to win one of them, email me with the answer to this. Who did Derek Niven get his pseudonym from? Who did Derek Niven get his pseudonym from? Now, if you've got this far on the pod, you'll have just heard the answer. Email me with that answer, 3lionspodcast@gmail.com. 3lionspodcast@gmail.com. And 2 will be picked at random by the 13th of February. Good luck. Now, just before we go, the Lionesses announced a couple of fixtures for February. Now, they're not being involved in any of the Nations League matches and no Arnold Clark Cup this year. They've decided to jet off to Spain to play a couple of fixtures. First, they play Austria on Friday the 23rd of February and then Italy on Tuesday the 27th. Now, both games will be played in, you're going to have to excuse my pronunciation here, Algeciras. I think that's how you pronounce it, Algeciras, in southern Spain. It's fairly close to Gibraltar. I'm guessing the closest airports are Malaga or Jerez, or Gibraltar, I guess. Of course, nearer the time, I'll have a preview episode covering the games. Playing away in another country against 2 sides who aren't from that country, I can't get my head around it. We've done it a couple of years back. You may remember it was November 2022. Again, in Spain, we beat Japan 4-0 and drew with Norway. Now, the FA are saying they're taking advantage of the warm weather. But I don't know, it just doesn't sit right with me. On the plus side, though, I'm sure you'll have seen the news that Leah Williamson has made her return to the Arsenal side. So, who knows? She may well be part of this latest squad. Anyway, though, tickets for the games, they are available now. It looks like they are just €10 each. Just got to get there, haven't you? There, that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for joining me, as always. I'll be back very soon, taking a look at that Nations League draw taking place on the 8th of February, who we've been drawn against and where we're going. I hope you can join me for it. Don't forget, you can follow the show on social media. Just search Three Lions Podcast. So until then, take care of yourselves. Cheers.